I'd headed out to an orphanage with my kids to drop off some donations. Right there in the corner, a little 6-year-old girl was tucked away, sobbing her heart out. The moment she spotted me, she bolted over and grabbed the edge of my sari, crying out, "Mummy, you finally came back for me." The manager of the orphanage told me that ever since she arrived, she hadn't stopped calling out my name. When I reached down and opened the locket hanging around her neck, my heart absolutely sank. The ground felt like it was shifting right beneath my feet. My heart was gripped by this strange restless dread and a sense of unease that I couldn't quite put a finger on. It felt as though something truly bizarre and terrible was about to happen. Up until that point, everything in my life had been perfectly fine. I was living a happy, peaceful life with a wonderful home, and God had blessed me with a beautiful, healthy 6-year-old son, who was my absolute world. But that day, for some reason, I felt a sudden urge to take him out of the safety of our four walls and visit those children who don't have the comfort of a parent's love. The thought had come to me out of the blue, like a calling from God for some specific purpose. I quickly got my son ready in some warm jumpers, packed the car with lollies, toys, and plenty of tucker, and set off for a massive orphanage located way out in the sticks. The building was miles away from the city's hustle and bustle, tucked away in a desolate and lonely area where a heavy silence hung in the air. As we drove, the scenery became more and more deserted, with towering trees lining both sides of the road, casting long shadows across our path. The trip was long and exhausting, but my son was having a whale of a time looking out the window. He'd point at the clouds or clap his hands whenever he saw birds perched in the trees. My gaze, however, kept drifting into the void. It felt as if something strange was pulling at me, and my heart was thumping hard in my chest. When our car finally pulled up in front of the large rusted gates of the orphanage, a cold shiver ran down my spine, giving me the goosebumps. The guard opened the heavy gates with a low, rumbling sound, and we drove inside. The walls of the building were in a bad way, covered in soot with paint peeling off everywhere, telling a story of isolation and sorrow. There was a dampness in the air and a peculiar heavy scent that you only ever find in these old, weathered buildings. I gripped my son's hand tightly as if I was terrified of losing him, and walked into the large hall where the caretaker was waiting. She was a middle-aged woman who gave us a warm welcome, yet I could see the sadness of the place reflected in her eyes. She led us toward the children's room. There were heaps of kids there, all busy playing different games, but their faces lacked that innocent spark of joy you usually see in children. When my son saw so many kids his own age, he jumped right in and started handing out the gifts I'd brought. Every child had a look of hope in their eyes, watching me as if I was some kind of angel, or perhaps they were seeing their own lost mothers in me. But for some reason, my eyes were searching for someone else. I was looking around restlessly. I patted the children on their heads and spoke to them kindly, but the unease in my heart didn't settle, it only grew stronger. That's when I noticed a small girl, sitting all alone in the furthest darkest corner of the room, with her head tucked down between her knees. The atmosphere around her felt completely different from the rest of the room, as if no joy could ever reach that spot. She was wearing old grubby clothes that looked a few sizes too big for her slight frame, and her hair was a tangled mess, completely hiding her face from view. This is a chilling setup for a mystery. I felt as if some unknown force had suddenly pulled me toward her. I couldn't even control my own steps as I started walking her way. My heart was thumping faster and faster, like a hammer pounding against my chest, and a strange prickly lump felt like it was stuck right in my throat. When I finally reached her, I heard the muffled sound of her sobbing. She was crying, and the way she sobbed was so heartbreaking that it felt like my heart was in my mouth. My eyes welled up all on their own. I mustered up some courage, called out to her and asked, "Sweetheart, why are you sitting here all by yourself, and what's got you crying?" Hearing my voice, she slowly lifted her head. When our eyes met, it felt like the whole world just stopped right then and there. She had these big, deep black eyes that held such a storm of shock and recognition that it absolutely rattled me. Her face was drenched in tears, but her features were such that she felt incredibly familiar to me, as if I'd known her for absolute ages. She just stared at me for a moment, wide-eyed, like she couldn't believe her own eyes, whether I was really there or if she was just dreaming. Then, all of a sudden, she shot up like a bolt of lightning and came running toward me. The way she acted was completely beyond anything I could wrap my head around. I couldn't even process it before she threw her arms around me and clung to me for dear life. Her tiny, frail hands gripped my clothes so tight, as if she was terrified that if she let go, I'd disappear into thin air and she'd be left all alone again. Through her tears and sobs, she asked me, "Mummy, have you come to take me home? I've been waiting for you for ages. I told God every single day to send you." Hearing her call me Mummy made the ground drop out from under me, and a ringing silence filled my ears. She said it with such absolute certainty and longing that for a split second, I actually felt like she really was my own child. But my son was right there playing with the other kids, and the doctors had told me my daughter had passed away at birth. I'd seen that baby buried with my own eyes. So who on earth was this little girl? And why was she calling me mummy? Was she someone else's child who'd gotten lost? Was my mind playing tricks on me? I tried to gently pull her away so I could get a proper look at her face, but she wouldn't let go. She kept crying, saying, "Don't leave me. I don't want to stay here anymore. I'm really scared. Please take me with you." The orphanage caretaker was watching the whole scene unfold. She walked over, looking completely baffled, and said, "Look, ma'am, this is incredibly strange and quite shocking. Ever since this girl was brought here, she hasn't spoken a word to anyone or gone near a soul. She just sits in the corner all day long. But she kept insisting that her mummy would come for her, even though you've only just turned up for the first time today, and you've got no connection to her. We don't even know her real name or what family she's from, because no one dropped her off. We actually found her in some desolate scrubland, and she was in a real bad way back then." Hearing the caretaker's words sent a whirlwind of questions through my head. I knelt down to wipe the girl's tears and took a good long look at her face. Her forehead, her eyes, and the shape of her lips, they looked so much like my son and my husband. The resemblance was so striking that it was impossible to ignore. I couldn't tell if I was imagining things or if my maternal instincts were playing up. But my heart just wouldn't believe that she was a stranger. My motherly instincts were surging within me. I comforted her and said, "Don't cry, sweetheart, I'm right here. Tell me, how do you know me?" But she just kept hiccuping and looking at me with those hopeful eyes. That's when my eyes landed on something around her neck. Hanging over her grubby clothes was an old rusted locket threaded onto a simple black string. The tension is building. That locket seems to be the key to everything. The moment I saw that locket, a massive explosion of memories went off in my head, because it was the dead ringer for a locket I used to own, a gift from my husband. But it had gone missing around the time of our wedding. I thought it had been stolen. I'd looked high and low for it, but I never found it. My hands reached out for that locket entirely on their own. I was shaking like a leaf, and my breath was catching in my throat. I felt like I was trapped in some bloody awful nightmare. Tentatively, I reached out to take the locket from the little girl's neck. It felt cold to the touch, with a thin layer of rust covering it. But the shape and that floral design etched onto it were exactly what I remembered. With my hands trembling, I pressed the tiny button to pop it open. My heart was thumping against my ribs. The lid was stuck because it was so old and weathered. I gave it a bit of muscle, and as soon as it snapped open and I looked inside, everything went black. A massive jolt ran through my entire being. I felt like my blood had turned to ice, because what was inside that locket was flat out impossible. It completely floored me. I couldn't even think straight. On the right side of the locket there was a tiny white photo. And that photo wasn't of anyone else, it was me. It was a shot taken years ago when I was preggo, and my face was glowing with that motherly joy and excitement. I was smiling in that picture. But what was even scarier was a tiny folded-up scrap of paper that had turned quite yellow with age. It was tucked under a small bit of glass opposite the photo. I pulled it out with my shaking fingers and flattened it. The paper felt brittle, and it had a hospital stamp on it, pretty faded now, but you could still make out what it said. It was written in my husband's own handwriting, and it absolutely blew my mind. There was a date on it too. That date felt like a death sentence to me, because it was the same cursed day my twins were born. The day I was told my son was alive but my daughter had been stillborn. But what was written on that paper proved that truth was a total lie. It said that this secret would stay buried in his chest forever, and it even had the name of the baby girl, the one I'd picked out with so much love when I was pregnant. When I read that name, my head started spinning. The noise in the room, the sounds of the other kids, it all just faded into the background. All I could see was that girl and that locket. How on earth was this possible? If my daughter was dead, then who the hell was this little girl? And how did she end up with my photo and a note in my husband's handwriting around her neck? Had I been conned? Was some sick, twisted game being played on me? My husband's face flashed before my eyes, his weird behavior at the hospital, that strange nervousness, and the way he'd rushed to have the baby buried. It all started playing back in my mind like a movie. I remembered he didn't even let me get a proper look at her face. He told me I wouldn't be able to handle it. I started feeling dizzy and just slumped down on the floor right there in front of the girl. She was still clutching my arm, and her innocent, frightened eyes held a question, asking if everything was going to be all right now. But she had no clue that the secret spilling out of that locket had shaken the very foundations of my life. I felt like I was sinking into a swamp, surrounded by darkness, lies, and deception. And in that darkness, all I could hear were her muffled sobs calling out to me. I had no idea what to do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag this secret out into the light for everyone to see. But my voice just died in my throat. The truth inside that locket was so bloody terrifying and sharp that it had completely robbed me of my ability to even think. This is such a gripping cliffhanger. The betrayal by the husband adds a whole new layer of darkness to the story. I was staring down two paths. Either I could bolt from that place and leave the secret exactly where it lay, or I could face a reality that had the power to absolutely wreck my happy life. But those innocent eyes of that little girl had me hook, line, and sinker. Even knowing the risks, I'd already fallen into the trap. The next chapter of this story was about to flip, and it was ready to kick up a real stinker of a storm in my life. That locket was clenched in my fist, its coldness seeping through my palm and chilling my heart. I knew for a fact that my life would never be the same again. The shadows of a past that had been written off as dead were now standing right in front of me, alive and well, demanding proof of their existence. And there I was, a silent witness, watching the wreckage of my own life unfold. Sitting there on the floor of that cold, dark orphanage room, I felt as if the life had been sucked right out of my body, like I was nothing more than a hollow shell, the person inside long gone. I held that freezing locket that had just spat out the most terrifying truth of my life, and before me sat a 6-year-old angel with 1,000 questions in her eyes. The orphanage caretaker was hovering over me, asking over and over, "Mom, are you all right? You've gone pale as a ghost all of a sudden." But her voice sounded like it was coming from miles away, echoing in some distant corner of my mind. My senses were blacking out, and all I could see was that image from inside the locket playing on loop. With a massive effort, I pulled myself together, leaning against the wall to stand up. My knees were knocking, and my head was spinning, but I had to toughen up. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about this little soul whom my husband had branded as dead and essentially buried alive. I wiped my eyes and looked at the caretaker, who was looking pretty worried. Steadying my voice, I said, "I'm fine, fair dinkum. Just a bit of a dizzy spell. I want to take this girl with me. Can I take her home for a few days?" The caretaker looked at me, completely stunned. "Well, that'd be lovely, ma'am," she said. "But the legal side of things, the paperwork, it'll take a bit of time." I didn't have time to wait. "Whatever papers you need, get them ready right now," I said, sounding desperate. "I can't leave her here for another second." I was terrified that if I left and someone turned up, or if my husband caught wind of this, the girl might be made to disappear forever. I handed over my ID and put down some bond money, just so they'd let me take her. The caretaker saw the state I was in and clearly reckoned something deep was going on. She didn't push for more answers and just gave me the nod. With shaking hands, I took hold of the girl's hand. She still hadn't let go of my clothes. Her hand was ice cold and she was petrified. But there was this strange look of trust in her eyes, like she knew she was finally in safe hands. By the time I walked out with my son and the little girl, dusk was settling in, and it felt like the sky itself was draped in sorrow. As we walked to the car, my mind was a whirlwind. I kept thinking, how could the bloke I've spent all these years with, the one I trusted with my eyes shut, be such a lying snake? Were all his claims of love just a load of rubbish? Were those tears he shed when our daughter was born nothing but crocodile tears? I got behind the wheel and put the girl in the back seat with my son. My boy, who'd been quiet until then, asked innocently, "Mum, who's this? Why's she coming back to ours?" His question absolutely gutted me. How could I tell him, "This is your sister, the one your dad tried to get rid of the moment she was born"? I fought back the tears and said softly, "She's a friend, mate. And she's going to be staying with us now." As soon as I started the car, the heavens opened up. The rain splashing against the windscreen only stirred the storm inside me even more. We were making tracks, but it felt like time had ground to a complete halt. I kept glancing at that little girl in the rearview mirror, and every single time I saw my hubby's face staring back at me. The same nose, the same forehead, the exact same eyes. The resemblance was so bloody obvious I could have spotted it even if I were blind as a bat. But then again, I'd been blind for years, hadn't I? Too blind to see my husband for who he really was. The rain was bucketing down now, and the roads were getting more and more deserted. The rhythmic click-clack of the windscreen wipers was like a hammer pounding away at my brain. I was mulling over what I'd actually do when I got home. Would I walk in and grab my husband by the scruff of his neck straight away? Or would I just stay quiet and wait to see how he reacted? Part of me wanted to pull the car over right then and there, scream my lungs out and tell the whole world about the massive injustice that had been done to me. But I had to keep my cool. I needed to find every last piece of the puzzle. I had to know, why on earth did he do it? What kind of desperation drives a father to dump his own flesh and blood like she was nothing? He was the only one who could give me those answers. We were getting closer to home and my heart was racing faster with every turn. I was heading back to a house that didn't even feel like a home anymore. It felt like a fortress built on lies, with deception baked into every single brick and wall. When the car pulled up to the front gate, I saw the lights were on in the lounge, which meant he was already home. My hands froze on the steering wheel, and for a second, I felt a wave of fear. I was about to face the man whose real face I was seeing for the very first time today. I took a deep breath and tapped into that motherly instinct, which made me feel brave as a lioness. I parked the car in the porch and got the kids out. Getting soaked in the rain, we made it to the front door. My boy went charging inside, happy as Larry, and yelled out, "Dad, look who we've brought home." I was holding the little girl's hand as I walked in slowly. There he was in the lounge, sitting on the sofa reading the paper with a cuppa sitting in front of him. Hearing our son's voice, he looked up with a smile and said, "G'day mate. You're back." And then his eyes landed on the little girl standing right behind me. And that moment right there was the longest, most decisive second of my entire life. I was ready to read every single flicker of expression on his face. The second his eyes hit that girl's face, his smile vanished like a light being switched off. The paper in his hand started shaking, and the color drained from his face so fast it looked like he didn't have a drop of blood left in him. His eyes were wide as saucers, and he sat there like a statue, staring at that girl as if he'd just seen a ghost. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room, with nothing but the tick-tock of the wall clock and the rain bucketing down outside. My son was still clinging to his legs, but it was like he couldn't even feel him there. All his focus was on that little girl, who was trying to hide behind me, probably scared of this strange new place, even if she felt a connection to me. I broke the silence, keeping my voice dead steady, and said, "We went out to the orphanage today. This little girl was sitting there all on her lonesome, crying her eyes out. I felt for her, so I brought her back with us. Did I do something wrong?" I asked it on purpose, just to see what he'd say. He jumped at my question, like he'd just woken up from a deep sleep. Flustered, he dumped the paper on the coffee table and said in a shaky voice, No, you did the right thing. It's a real good deed, that. But why'd you bring her here, to the house? I mean, we don't even know who she is, do we? Where she's from?" I could clearly sense the fear and panic hidden in his voice. He was trying his best to avoid my gaze, constantly wiping sweat off his forehead even though it was freezing in the room. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I don't know who she is either. But the weird thing is, she recognizes me. She's calling me mummy. And the folks at the orphanage told me that ever since she got there, she's been saying her mummy would come for her. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Hearing that, he lost it even more, and downed a whole glass of water in one go. Then he stuttered, "Oh, she's just a kid. She's probably just confused." The way he's trying to dodge the truth is making the tension unbearable. I said, "But look, she's the spitting image of you, isn't she?" He just went, "Look, that happens all the time. People look like other people. Don't go overthinking it and just drop her back off. We can't be keeping some unknown bit of trouble in the house." Hearing that made my blood absolutely boil. He was calling his own flesh and blood an unknown bit of trouble. Keeping a lid on my temper, I said, "I'm not just dumping her back until we find out who her parents are. She's staying right here, and honestly, her face looks way too familiar to me. Take a proper look. Doesn't she remind you of someone?" I pulled the girl out from behind me and put her front and center. The poor thing looked at him all fearful like. The moment their eyes met, I saw a weird flash in my husband's eyes. It turned into regret or maybe even terror in a heartbeat. He looked away straight away and snapped, "How should I know who she looks like? I'm buggered. I need to get some rest." And with that, he bolted towards the bedroom. His running away like that was proof enough for me. He was guilty as sin. But I wasn't about to give up. I handed the girl over to the nanny and followed him right into the room. Inside, I saw him standing by the window, staring out into the dark, his hands clenched into tight fists. I shut the door and went to stand near him. I still had the locket hidden in my fist. Looking at his back, I said, "I found something else at the orphanage today that you might find real interesting." At that, he turned around and gave me a questioning look. I slowly opened my hand and held out that rusted locket. The second he saw it, a faint gasp escaped his lips, and he jumped back a couple of steps, as if I'd just chucked a bloody venomous snake in front of him. His face, which was already pale, went even whiter. He stuttered, Where did you get that?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "It was around that girl's neck, and do you know what's inside it?" He stayed quiet, but his breathing started getting real heavy. I pressed the button on the locket and popped it open, showing him my photo and that bit of paper he'd written on. I said, "There's my photo in here. And this paper has your handwriting on it, along with the date our kids were born. Are you still going to tell me she's an unknown bit of trouble? Are you still going to pretend you don't know her?" My questions were like arrows piercing right through him. He slumped against the wall, completely out of words. The tension in the room was so thick you could hardly breathe. I took another step forward and yelled, "Why aren't you saying anything? I want answers. Is this my daughter? The one you told me was dead? Was I shedding tears over a living soul all this time?" As my voice echoed, he dropped to his knees on the floor and grabbed his head with both hands. He looked miserable, but it didn't look like true repentance to me. He kept his head down and said in a muffled voice, "You've got it all wrong. It's not what you're thinking. There's a massive reason behind this. A secret I never wanted to tell you. Because if that secret ever came out, it would have wrecked our home." I pushed her away because of a huge fear I had. But fate's gone and brought her back. His words just made me even more confused and angry. I leaned down, grabbed him by the collar, and gave him a hard shake. "Don't you start spinning me some yarn," I snapped. "I just want the truth. What secret? How would it wreck our home? Was a little girl's life worth less than our house? You've conned me, and now you're talking in riddles." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Whether they were tears of regret or just a bit of acting, I couldn't tell. He pulled my hand off his collar and stood up. "That is an incredible cliffhanger. The mystery of why he would do such a thing is so deep." Then he spoke in this weird, unsettling way. "If I told you why this girl is alive and how she ended up here, you probably wouldn't be able to stomach it. You reckon I tried to kill her, don't you? But the fair dinkum truth is, I was actually trying to save her skin." His words just made me more confused. Now I was thinking it wasn't just about him wanting a son, or some old family grudge I'd been kept in the dark about. It felt like something else entirely. But right then, the only truth I had was that my daughter was alive, and my husband had lied to my face for years. I told him straight, in a dead serious voice, "I want to know everything, no matter how bitter the pill is." But he cut me off sharp. "Not now. It's not the right time. All you need to know for now is that she's not safe. And if anyone catches wind that she's back, all our lives are going to be in proper danger." That threatening warning absolutely rattled me. Were we really in trouble, or was he just spinning another yarn? I was just about to grill him more when there was a frantic, heavy pounding on the door. The nanny's voice came through from outside, sounding completely panicked. "Ma'am, come out quick. The little girl's passed out and her nose is bleeding." Hearing that, both me and my husband bolted for the door. The fear on his face now was even more terrifying than before. It was like his worst nightmare was finally coming true right before his eyes. We got to the lounge and saw the poor thing lying there on the rug, unconscious, and her skin was starting to turn a sickly blue. My son was bawling his eyes out and the nanny was trying to splash water on her face. I scrambled over, scooped her up and held her in my lap. Her body was burning up like a furnace. My husband whipped out his phone and made a frantic call. What he said next made the ground drop out from under me yet again. He was shouting into the phone, "Doc, get here fast. She's back, and the symptoms are starting up again. It's the same illness as back then. Get a move on, or it'll be too late." I was stunned, frozen like a statue. So it wasn't just a matter of hiding her, there was some kind of illness involved. Some massive reason that I hadn't even realized. But what kind of disease could a tiny little girl have that would be reason enough to tear her away from her own mother? I looked at my husband with 1,000 questions in my eyes as he put the phone down and started checking her pulse. The way his hands moved, so practiced and sure, told me he'd dealt with this exact situation before. Without even looking at me, he said, "We've got to get her to a hospital. But not just any hospital. We have to go back to where she was born. That old hospital way out of town." My skin absolutely crawled when he said that. That hospital had been shut down for years and was nothing but a derelict, creepy ruin now. What was the point of going there? I wanted to shout at him to stop, but seeing the state the girl was in, I stayed quiet. We bundled her up and ran for the car. The rain had turned into a full-blown storm now, and the night was pitch black. The second we got in, my husband took the wheel and started driving like a bat out of hell. I was in the back seat with the girl's head in my lap, and my son was huddled up tight beside me. I caught a glimpse of my husband's face in the mirror. The panic had been replaced by a strange, desperate obsession. He kept muttering under his breath, "I won't let anything happen to her. I won't make the same mistake twice." His words didn't give me any comfort. They were bloody terrifying. We left the bright city lights behind and hit the desolate, unsealed tracks, heading towards that old-school hospital, the one famous for the rumors of weird experiments. All sorts of dark thoughts started racing through my head. Was he taking me and the kids out there to get rid of us? Or was there some other horror waiting for us? But I was a mother and I was stuck, so I just sat there in silence. The girl's breathing was getting ragged, and in her unconscious state, she was mumbling some strange words that made no sense to me. But those words seemed to rattle my husband even more. Suddenly, there was a massive jolt, and the car ground to a halt. It looked like we were bogged in the mud. My husband slammed his hand against the steering wheel and jumped out. I looked out the window, petrified. There was nothing but deep darkness and the deafening roar of the rain. The tension is at a breaking point. Being bogged in the mud outside a haunted hospital with a sick child is a nightmare scenario. That's when I spotted some shadows shifting in the glare of the headlights. They looked like human shapes, but they were moving in a proper weird way. My husband was standing outside, staring at these shadows, and instead of being petrified, he was actually talking to them as if he knew them from way back. This sight made my blood turn to ice. Who were these people? What was my husband's connection to them, and why on earth were they already out here in the middle of nowhere waiting for us? I scrambled to lock the car doors and pulled my kids tight against my chest. But what happened next was more than I could stand. One of the shadows stepped forward and came into the light. When I saw his face, a scream ripped out of my throat, because that bloke was none other than the doctor who'd told me my daughter had died 6 years ago. There he was, standing with my husband, wearing a smirk that was pure evil. He put a hand on my husband's shoulder and said, "You've gone against your word, mate. You brought her back? Now whatever happens next is on your head." Hearing that, my husband collapsed at his feet, begging, "Just save her. I'll do whatever you want. Just please save her." What the hell was going on? Why was my husband groveling at a doctor's feet, and what promise were they talking about? My brain had completely given up trying to make sense of it. Right then, the doctor walked up to the windscreen and pressed his hand against the glass. On his finger was the exact same ring I'd noticed back when I was in delivery. He looked at me through the glass, and there was a look in his eyes that told me the real game had only just begun, that me and my kids were pawns in some massive sick conspiracy with roots buried deep in the past. I was trapped inside the car. Outside stood my husband and that devil of a doctor, and in my lap was my daughter, whose very life was hanging by the thread of some dark secret. This night was going to be a long one. The storm and the roar of the rain were one thing, but the storm raging inside me had left me numb. My husband was still pleading with that monster, who was just watching the whole drama with a cold, hard stare. My daughter's body was turning cold. Her breathing was getting fainter. Seeing that, I couldn't cop it anymore. I summoned every bit of grit I had left, threw the car door open and stepped out into the bucketing rain. When the doctor saw me, a sly, filthy grin spread across his face. My husband, on the other hand, looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "What the hell is this circus? And what kind of promise was this girl sacrificed for?" The doctor let out a cackle that drowned in the crack of lightning. He stepped forward, gave my husband a kick and spat out, "Why don't you tell your missus how you traded your own daughter just to save your son?" Hearing those words felt like the sky had come crashing down on my head. I looked at my husband with a mix of shock and pure loathing. There he stood, drenched in rainwater and his own tears, looking like a common criminal. In a heavy, broken voice he confessed. When the twins were born, he started, "The doctor told me our son had a rare terminal illness. There was no cure, he was going to die in a matter of days. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my only heir. That's when the doctor showed me a way out. He said that because she was a twin, our daughter was the perfect genetic match for him. She had the immune cells that could keep our son alive." He went on, "The doctor said the treatment wouldn't be easy. It was a long-haul process, and the most important thing was that the girl had to stay under their constant supervision. I had to hand her over to them because I had to save my boy. It was a necessity to keep her tucked away in their care. But how was I going to pull that off? When I asked the doctor, he told me to just tell everyone the girl was stillborn. From then on, these people kept our girl in a secret lab. And in exchange, our son got to live. I was so greedy to save my son and keep the family name going that I turned my own daughter into a living ghost and sent her away. I gave her that locket just in case my conscience ever woke up, so I'd be able to recognize her." The level of betrayal here is absolutely staggering. Selling one child to save another is a heavy, dark secret to carry. Hearing all this, I couldn't believe my bloody ears. How could a father be so heartless as to sacrifice his own daughter just for the sake of his son's life? And do you really reckon he was keeping her there for treatment? No way, she was in a dungeon. They treated her like nothing more than a machine to manufacture medicine. When she finally managed to bolt from that place, she was in a real bad way. They'd been pumping her full of injections, not to keep her alive, but to keep her weak and manageable. The caretaker at the orphanage told me as much. Suddenly the doctor barked out, "Enough with the yapping. Hand the girl over right now. Otherwise your son's a goner too, because their lives are linked together." Hearing that threat, I bolted back to the car and clutched my daughter to my chest. My son had scrambled out of the car by then, crying his eyes out, and he grabbed onto my hand. I looked that doctor dead in the eye and said, "There is no way in hell I am giving you my daughter now. Not even if it costs me my own life. You've preyed on my husband's weakness and his stupidity, but I've finally woken up to the truth. Life and death are in God's hands, not in the hands of butchers like you." My husband, who'd been quiet as a mouse until then, saw us all standing there together, and I reckon his sense of honor finally kicked in. Or maybe that fatherly instinct that had been buried for years just suddenly snapped. He lunged at the doctor, shoved him to the ground and yelled at me, "Take the kids and bolt. I'll hold him off." I didn't waste a single second. I bundled the kids into the car and got behind the wheel. The doctor tried to get up and block my path, but my husband tackled him. I slammed the car into reverse and got the hell out of that nightmare at top speed. I wasn't looking back for anything. I drove straight to the police station to put an end to this bloody game once and for all. Then, I rushed my daughter to a proper hospital. After a full checkup, the doctors told me she'd been systematically poisoned, but thank God she was out of the woods. And my son? He was perfectly healthy. He didn't have a single thing wrong with him. It was all a massive load of rubbish, a scam the doctor had cooked up to use my daughter for his sick experiments and to squeeze money out of my husband. My husband was hauled off to jail, and that devil of a doctor got nicked too. My daughter is with me now, and my son is over the moon to have his sister back. But this whole ordeal taught me the biggest lesson of my life. Trying to pick favorites between your kids is like picking a fight with God's will. Whether it's a boy or a girl, they are both a blessing. When a person lets their own desires or social pressure force them into sacrificing their relationships, it leads to nothing but total ruin. Greed and the obsession with having a son robbed my husband of his peace and his family. It showed me that no matter how deep you bury a secret, the truth always sees the light of day and drags every hidden sin out with it. Today I'm raising my 2 kids on my own, but I'm finally at peace because there are no more lies between us. So if you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. Give the video a like, some hype, and share it round as much as you can. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next update. Disclaimer: this story is completely fictional. The characters, events, and places are all products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The medical scenes and treatments shown are for storytelling purposes only. Do not take them as real medical advice. Always consult a doctor for any health issues. The aim of this story is to entertain while sending a message to society about not discriminating between sons and daughters. Cheers!